And honestly, I really didn't even know what I was really getting myself involved in. There's really two gods that are very famous in the Chinese Triads. People who believe in this, they have a fear that these spirits are going to protect, but also they want to be obeyed. I just thought, man, there's no way I'm going to make it until I'm 17 or 18. Because the deeper you get in, the stakes are higher. And he's saying, today's the day you're going to die, I'm going to kill you. And I wasn't afraid really of this guy. I was afraid of dying and meeting the spirit. This is what I could think about. Is I'm about to enter and not be able to come back. This is not a dream.
Hello and welcome back to the Almost False podcast, where I interview regular people with incredible stories. Today's guest grew up in Malaysia and became a leader in one of the biggest Chinese triads of his country, which is their equivalent of the Mafia. He shared how these groups operate and especially how they use spirituality to advance their criminal agendas. That alone would be interesting, but the best part about this guest is not what he knows, but what he has experienced. You'll see what I mean by the end, but the mere fact that he's alive today is a literal miracle, or should I say 3 miracles. That might be too much. So let's not get ahead of ourselves and start from the very beginning as we learn from the life story of Choby Siau and how he became a member of a Chinese triad.
By the time I was, just before I turned 13, my parents decided to move back to Asia, to Malaysia, which is next to Singapore. We have family in Malaysia. It's a lot of the same culture. And we went to an island called Penang. And I did hear things from some classmates that there was some kind of group in the school. And again, in this school, because I was dyslexic, I was in special ed class. So I'm away from most of the students every day I go, and I was supposed to have a fight with this guy, and apparently my brother was involved with this group in the school. And when I was gonna have this fight, we planned it on a Friday to do a one-on-one. And so it ended, and the classmates are coming around because they know that there's gonna be a fight between me and this other guy. But when the students are kind of making like a circle and kind of getting together, I see a few cars pull up, and one guy walks over to the group, and he said, I'm looking for Joel's brother. My older brother's name is Joel. I'm looking for Joel's brother. I say that's me. And he said, you see these guys here? We're here because we found out that you're gonna have a one-on-one, and we're from your brother's group, and we're coming here to make sure everything is gonna be in control and not no go out of hand. So I fight this guy. I get done, and the guy tells me, he says, and at that time, I didn't know what a triad was. I just thought it was a gang. That's all I could think about, because that's all I didn't know about organized crime. And he said, with our group, if you're a family member of an official member, then we treat you like one of our guys. That's why we're here to protect you. Because if you're a brother of a brother to us, then you're our family, and we're coming here to protect our family. But he said, I want you to think about joining. But I told him, I said, you gotta give me a week to think about this. And 1 week goes by. It was the next Friday. I'm walking back. I always walk to my school from my house. And I leave my school. I'm walking down the sidewalk to get to my house. There's only maybe like a 10-minute walk. And this car was in between my house and the school, by the sidewalk. And that guy was in the car. And he rolls down his window, and I'm like, man, this guy's waiting for me. And he says to me, he says, hey, you said 1 week, and today's 1 week. And I know he's waiting for an answer. And honestly, I really didn't even know what I was really getting myself involved in. I just tell him, okay, I'll join.
Okay, so you were 13, right? And you joined this triad now, and you said you didn't really know what you were getting into. I don't personally know what a triad is as well, and I feel like a lot of people maybe don't fully understand. So can you explain what is a triad and how does the hierarchy of power work, and how's it set up?
Yeah. So the Chinese Triad is basically kind of like you got the Mexican cartel, you got the Italian mafia. This is a Chinese form of the mafia. In Malaysia, where I was at in Penang, we have we have a number of triads that are there. Our island is split up. Pretty much every area is a territory of a triad, of organized crime group. You have your bosses, we call Dailo. In China, you call it Dailo, right? And the Dailo runs a branch. And there's a lot of different branches within the triad group. So you have a structure, and with actually the Chinese character triad, it represents heaven, earth, and man. And they started actually as a political group against the government. They tie in political party also, so they have a lot of ties within the voting process. They have ties within very, very high level and profile people that they have within the group. So it's really a mixture of different professions and different types of people. You have the gangsters, you have the hardcore gangsters, you do have the illegal elements, and a lot of times people who talk about triads, they talk about the illegal elements, but there's also a lot of legal aspect also involved. So you have the attorneys that work together, you have legal businesses, you have people that are they're not really acting as a gangster, right? They're working within the triad or they're tied in as a member, but their daily life, you would never think they're a criminal, but they're actually a triad member. And then you have the actual criminal element when they're doing organized crime also, and heavy organized crime. Things that are coming into what we call the golden triangle, which is Southeast Asia, ties in like Thailand, Cambodia, Burma, all these areas, and they're funneling drugs, they're funneling people trafficking, white collar crime. I mean, it's they're tied into a lot into the society. And then you also have the spiritual element.
So actually, I wanted to ask about this, the spiritual side of it, and I want to spend a little bit of time to kind of flesh it out and how that looks in a triad, because I'm wondering, like, what kind of beliefs do they have? If you can kind of explain like what they believe in as far as like God or gods or anything like that, and then temples or practices, like what does it look like in the triad? What do they believe in?
Yeah, so um, they have a form of Buddhism. They will call, if you ask a triad member, most of them in Penang, in my city, right? If you ask most of them, what is your religion? They're going to say, generally speaking, they'll say they're Buddhist. But it's a type of Buddhism that ties in a form of witchcraft. So they have what we call Brahmos, which over here in the Americas we say maybe like a witch doctor. But it'd be a type of a Buddhist monk that will do spells over the members, right? They'll even give them things to eat, like things that are special herbs that have either spells or curses on them, or blessings for protection for them to actually eat. And there's really two gods that are very famous in the Chinese triads that most triads worship. One is a war god. He's a god of war, and he's actually a statue with a big weapon. His face is usually very, very almost like a blood red or even black, and he's the god of war. So they worship this god of war many times for the triad, for protection, to give them the power, and they also worship a monkey god. And sometimes you'll see this monk like a monkey, like a kung fu monkey in some kung fu movies or some anime. But this is actually a real god that they worship, and they'll tattoo this on their backs. They'll tattoo the war god on them. But it comes into an even deeper and darker side when they're getting the spells placed on them. Um, it's a combination of a prayer ritual, and a trance, and also a tattoo process. So the monks will have a session with the members, and the monks will kind of go into a trance. They'll kind of get a word from the spirit about what to place on this person, almost like what spirit wants to accompany this person, and they're gonna open a portal through a tattoo. So they're gonna make this process happen, and they're gonna go through trances, right? I think one of my friends, he said he passed out like 2-3 times going through the trance, and he's opening himself up to a protection spirit or a war spirit, and these spirits will accompany them for fights, for protection, and it's to really advance the agenda of the triad.
Okay, so I'm trying to get this straight. I feel like you explained it pretty well, but I want to make sure that I understand this correctly, and for the people in the audience to actually have the same understanding. The whatever, like monk, I think you said the monk will sit down with a member and they'll go through a session so that both of them kind of enter a trance, and then in the trance, the monk will have some kind of word from the spirit as to what symbol to put on the person, and then that symbol kind of like opens the person to carry the spirit of whatever was there, and then the spirit kind of from that point on is attached to the person through the tattoo. Not that the tattoo is like a physical attachment point, but it's like a right to the person in some sort. Like, did I get that right, or is there parts that I got wrong about this?
No, that is pretty much dead on. It's a very highly demonic um, um, ritual, but it's very powerful also, because I never got the spiritual tattoos. You know, I mean, I'm tatted up, but the spiritual tattoos I never wanted to mess with, because I already seen what these things do, and it's a very terrifying thing. The person feels empowered, and they can go and not get chopped up with machetes and stuff. Over there, a lot of fights are done with machetes and knives, but these guys would go for gang fights, not get hacked up at all. They're coming out scratchless, because this possession is a supernatural possession that takes place that protects the person, so the person feels in a way invincible. But it comes also at a cost, and they know it comes at a cost. You know, maybe they have to fast for a certain amount of time to please the spirit, or they have to do uh, certain sacrifices. They also sometimes got to pick their finger where there's blood, and they got to put it on the idol that represents the spirit. So it's all, they also know it's going to come at a cost, even though they feel empowered. So these things are very it's very prevalent within the triad groups in my city.
I'm curious, and I know you didn't get the tattoos yourself, but you might have the answer. I don't know if you have it, but I'm just personally curious. What happens if the person that gets the tattoo refuses to do these sacrifices and the other things that you talk about? Like, have you ever encountered someone that just refused to do that, and then what would happen?
We hear stories of people that we know a person knows a person, or we know someone that's kind of like not super close to us. So not in my group, but the people that we do hear about, for example, they either get super super sick, deadly sick, and they got to go back to the Brahmos, they got to go back to the witch doctors, and they got to pay atonement. Or there are times that, for example, they wear what we call samples. And what a sample is, it's a little glass tube that they wear on their necklace. So the word necklace, sometimes they have like 5 or 6 samples. They're like one here, one here, one here. And these samples, you can't take them off. When you wear them, there's only certain times you can take them off, and certain times you got to put them on. And one of my ex-girlfriends, her very close friend, they were both wearing these samples, and they were told not to take them off, only at certain times. And they went on a motorcycle. They didn't wear the samples, and that day they both got hit. They both got killed. So we hear these stories, and we people who believe in this, they have a fear that you know These spirits are going to protect, but also they want to be, they want to be followed. They want to be obeyed. So it's really also like there's a contract of fear also in this.
Okay. And we briefly mentioned about temples. I'm curious. I don't know if there's much to it. Is it just a traditional like Buddhist temple? What does it look like? What is the kind of place that they worship or do these rituals in?
These temples here, if you think about actual the normal Buddhism, the traditional Buddhism, they may have a statue of Buddha, but there's not too much involved because they believe in getting to a state of nothingness, right? But this is mixed with a type of Southeast Asian Buddhism where they're taking in a form of Thai Buddhism. Is Thai, Cambodian, Southeast Asian Buddhism mixed with like Taoism. So it's kind of like when you go into these temples, there's a lot of idols. There's a lot of idols, and they're it's very dark and very heavy. You know, you do have your the monks who are going to wear the orange robe. The ones that are, you know, they're all straight up and clean. They're doing their prayers, and it is open to the public. A lot of these temples that triads use are also public because they also have public sessions. Like for example, the triad I was involved in, once a year they would parade in the road, right? They got the idols. They have monks playing chants, and the members of the triad also wear a shirt, right? We had a white shirt. It was an orangey yellow collar with the name of the deity on our shirt, and they're also making a yearly, almost like a parade for this, and it's in public, right? So and so also the temples are open to the public, but also behind the scenes though, um, the triads know, okay, this temple in this area, we know that this is their area, and this is their temple they use, and then we know in this temple down here, we know that these some of these monks here, or or the Brahmos or whatever, we know that they are dedicated to this different triad also. So it's kind of open to the public, but um, public has access to them, but also in behind in the underground world, the societies know, okay, this temple belongs to this territory and this triad.
Interesting. I'm wondering. You said that your parents were Christians. You were introduced to this at a very young age. At 13, you joined. So, what did you think when you were introduced to these things, which was probably very foreign to anything that you had seen at least at home? What did you think, and what was your reaction when you first came across that?
Yeah, because my father in the Chinese side, he's the first and one of the only believers in the family. So most of my uncles, most of my cousins and relatives, they're also Buddhists or Taoists or ancestor worship. So growing up, when I go visit my relatives, I see the idols in their house, or they're wearing them, you know, or they do their depending on the Chinese calendar, they're also practicing the different worships according to the calendar. So I was already aware of kind of how stuff happens, like generally. When it came to like, you know, the more of the witchcraft cut type of stuff, that was eye opening for me. At the same exact time, um, since a very young age, I would also see spirits and demons. I would have some serious sleep paralysis, but it was more than just sleep paralysis. I would actually, in my soul, I'd be leaving my body, and I would be able to I would look at my body. Sometimes I look at my siblings sleeping, and I'm walking around the house, you know, and then at the same time I'm also seeing spirits in the house or trying to torment me. So um and that's one reason why I never wanted to get the tattoos, because I already was seeing stuff, and I didn't want to enter into a deeper part with this kind of spirit realm, because it was already at a level that was for me terrifying. I didn't want to enter into anything deeper.
Yeah, totally understandable. I think you probably made a good choice by that. Definitely, that's probably not something you should have been a part of, but at least it's good that you had an understanding of the spiritual realm. I think most people kind of don't have these experiences and don't really know, and so it would have been easier if you had never had that to kind of get involved in those kind of rituals. So it's although it's unfortunate to have these kinds of experiences, because I know they can be very terrifying. Speaking to a few people that have, well, a decent amount of people that actually had them, it seemed like it actually worked in your favor later on. But I want to go back with your dad, because your dad is a big part of your story, and we talked about in the beginning how he would get violent. He had anger issues. When you would go back home, he wasn't the nicest to you, and is very cold. Um, Now you were part of a gang, now part of a triad, and so at some point you start to be able to defend yourself. I'm wondering what happened the first time that you decided to fight back against your dad.
I got to a place in my mentality that I just didn't want anyone to mess with me anymore. No matter who it was, And I was going back home, and I got an altercation with my dad, and the altercation, it turned physical, and we started first being verbal, and then he started to really punch me up, And I remember that it was in our living room, and he threw me to the floor. And when I hit the floor, he put his knee on my temple, and he was really pressing down. And I remember on the floor thinking, "Well, I really want to kill my dad." And I actually told him during that time that I'm gonna get the mafia to kill you. But when I got back up, though, immediately I grabbed the closest thing that was to me. That there was the dining room chair. I just started swinging at it, and I started smashing the windows of my house. I smashed this fish tank, and I go in my room, and I'm so angry. Actually, I looked for the machete. My dad used to keep a machete because we had coconut trees outside of our house. I went, actually, after hitting him and smashing the windows. I went to this little cupboard near my kitchen, and machete wasn't there. Kitchen knives weren't there, and my parents at that time, they would hide the kitchen knives because they were afraid that I was going to take a kitchen knife one day. And actually, it was smart they did that. Anyways, I went to my room. My dad came to me, and he really started to apologize. He really started to apologize, and but for me, those words was really empty in the beginning. I just thought nothing's gonna change after all these years. He's been such a violent person, such an angry person, and he calls himself a Christian. But what does it mean to me? But after that time, I really saw that there was actually a change in him, and he was starting to make effort that I've never seen before, and he started to really reach out to me, and almost every day he started making a little bit of effort, and he would say, "Oh, how are you?" Like, he would start to try to connect with me, and at first I thought, "Oh, he's doing it because he regrets his actions or whatever." And to my surprise, to be honest, I always say that the first major miracle I ever seen in my life was God changing my father, because I know humanly he wouldn't have been able to change himself. He had anger, I had anger. I mean, I had major anger, he had major anger, but there was something that was changing him. And I, even in my mind, at that time I would never admit it, but in my mind, I knew, I had this thing that thinking, man, this has to be God, because he wasn't going back. And honestly, because of this change in my dad, I actually started to like him, you know? And we started becoming, like, starting to build a relationship. He got my trust, He got my trust. People say, oh, like, maybe he changed because you fought back, you defended him. No, no. Let me tell you, I knew this man. It was a God thing. So, like, it was really, I see a God timing that things are happening in my family, because the streets were dangerous for me. I mean, there were times, like, I just thought, man, there's no way I'm gonna make it until I'm 17 or 18. I'm just not gonna make it, because the deeper you get in, the stakes are higher. You know, like the kids that are gangsters now. By the time they're 16, man, they're becoming hard, and then they're making that decision to take a really a career path in the triad, and you gotta bring things to another level, But the home started to become a place of I can actually find refuge, and I never had my home as a refuge, you know. But now I had a relationship with my father and started caring for me, and he knew I was a gangster. I mean, I would have gang meetings sometimes in my living room, but they were. I tell you, my mom was a praying woman too, and she would plant seeds in my heart too. When I would go, she would tell me, son, you're fighting the wrong battle. I was thinking, what's this woman talking about? Because my goal was to advance the territory, and that's how I got my name out there, because I was put in charge of taking over an area. We did successfully. The bosses had a lot of favor because of that, and that was my every day. I woke up, I breathed how to expand and how to train our guys to be successful in what we got to do. So that was the main goal of my life as a teenager. But I did start to have a true respect and honor for my dad, because culturally speaking, he had every right to keep on being the father he was. You know, if he would go to most people in Asia and say, "Oh, I beat my kids even as a Christian," no longer will say, "Oh, I did the same thing." But he really had a revelation, and that revelation started to work in my life.
I find that fascinating because in many aspects, one of the reasons why you joined the triad, why you started a gang even before that, was because the home was the hardest part, and you were kind of seeking refuge from home. Even though you were getting bullied and beat at school, home was worse. And so the gang and the triad kind of became protection and your refuge in some sense. But then that kind of flipped now, where the triad became extremely dangerous, and now that your dad had changed, the home kind of became sort of a refuge. So I find that very interesting. But I also want to talk about the years that you spent as a teenager, and you said you had advanced and you were leading a group. What does life look like as a teenager and a part of the triad? Like, what is the day to day? Because I don't know if you're still going to school, but can you tell us what that looks like?
Well, one reason why I was put as a branch leader was because I got kicked out of school at 13. I got kicked out of school at a young age, and um, they actually the leaders, most of the time, depending on the leader, every leader is a little bit different. The branch leader, Tai Lo, most leaders, they want their guys to stay in school. To be honest, they want you to be educated, because they know if you remain a member, whatever profession you are, you're also going to benefit the group. But I was kicked out at 13 because I was actually leading a gang fight to another rival school, and I got kicked out. And when I was out, I mean, my leader, he had me meet with him and some of the other elders, and he said, "Listen," he said, "Choby, listen, I want you to be the right hand man right now, because you're not going to school." And he said, "What are your plans?" I said, "I'm not going back, because I was struggling. I was dyslexic." I didn't tell him that, but I just said, "Listen, I'm not cut out for this. But I want to remain a member." He said, "That's fine. We got a place for you." He said, "From now on, you're my right hand man. With everyone in the schools now, they're gonna come under you. I gotta make sure that the problems are settled, or I gotta talk to their leader, or if there's recruitment thing, or someone within the group, because sometimes you have internal problems in your own group. So as a leader, it's not only just how are you dealing with the other triads, what we're doing, right? Like, how are we handling our territory? How are we coming through for the boss? All this, is everyone following in line? But it's also within the group, are these guys um, following the rules of each other too, right? And you're basing it off the rules, because we have our own laws that we follow. So um, the day to day is making sure all the guys are good, that they're handling their business properly. The conflicts of the other triad groups are good. maintaining order also from the top down. They're telling me what I got to tell the group. And I got to pass that information onwards. They're saying, hey, we got a conflict here and there. Now we got to rally our guys up and go. Sometimes it's the other part of the island, other part of the city, and we got to go down. Sometimes we've got calls, 3, 4 in the morning, and you got to wake up, you got to leave the house, and you got to get down to the conflict.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to tell you about our extra content on Locals. It's where you can hear the beginning of our conversations, learn the practical applications of the testimonies, and get hours worth of other bonus content. All of that, plus the regular episodes without any ads. It's free to join, so why don't you come check it out by going to almostfalse.locals.com by downloading the Locals app. The links are in the description. Now let's get back to the story. It's kind of incredible how, like, not in a good way, but how you were put in these positions at such a young age. But you had mentioned that after being kicked out of school, that's kind of what you wanted to do. That was your goal in life. You wanted to advance the Triad. You wanted to be a member, and you had already climbed up the ranks, and you were, I imagine you were still climbing. Why did you decide to move to the United States, even though it seemed like you had what you were looking for in Malaysia? Like, what happened?
Yeah, so when I was a branch leader, right, there was like, I think around 40 guys that were under me. But as 16, 16, 17 years old, I mean, at this time, I'm thinking to myself, man, like, I feel like I have the power. I have what I want. You know, you have the recognition of also the leaders. You're on very good terms with them. They love you, and you love them back. And you have the girls. You have it's almost like you get to a place that even I thought at a branch leader, if I'm not satisfied here and I kind of got what I want, if I go to the very top, I don't even know what else I'm going to find. I really don't really know what I'm going to find. So I had this question in my mind, like, is there anything else in life? And I thought, man, what I have right now, I'm not satisfied. So my mother, she had a word from the Lord, and the word of the Lord came to her, and I didn't know this at the time, but God spoke to her that if she doesn't leave with the family, that I'm gonna end up getting killed. So we end up leaving, and I thought I'm just gonna go to the States and I'm just gonna go see how America's like, because I already know I know my country. I know Malaysia very well. I'm just gonna come go to the U.S. for a little bit, see how it is. But I had a girlfriend back in Malaysia, and so in one of the rules that we have in the Triad is that you cannot touch uh, a member's girlfriend or wife. Like, this is like a common law. We call it a law. It's a common law across the Triads, and they swear into this kind of this. They swear into this. So my leaders informing me that a guy that we know who is affiliated with the Triad, um, that he's with your girl right now. And I remember being so furious. I thought I come to the States, and this is what I get. And so I called her and I said, listen, I'm buying a plane ticket, and I got a present waiting for that guy. And she starts freaking out because she finds out that I know now. And so I ended with her, but I plan to go back and fly back from the U.S. to Penang, Malaysia, to find this guy. I remember, like, I'm about to leave my front door, and my mother is standing at the door, and she says to me, son, look at me. And I start looking at her, and my mom's crying. She says, I want to tell you something. And this whole time, I never knew that God even spoke to her that I was going to get killed over there. That's why the family moved. I didn't even know that. I thought she was just going back because, you know, it's a different season or whatever. But she said to me, I never made this prayer before, but I pray to God that He will do whatever it takes in your life when you go back. because she knew I was full of rage, man. She knew I was going after this guy. I mean, I blew up when I found out. And I remember I took a little New Testament Bible with me, and I took that with me because I just felt like I needed like some kind of good luck or something because I couldn't read. I never read a book at that point. And when I'm sitting in the airplane, like all I could think about was just death. Like I'm thinking about I'm about to go kill this guy in Malaysia. I'm thinking about my life, how miserable it is, but I'm just thinking about like, I was also freaking out because I always get paranoid in the airplanes that it's gonna crash, and I was really paranoid in the airplane. And so I'm in the airplane. I got this New Testament Bible, and I flip it open, and I remember I saw these words pop out, and I can't find the same verse again, and it was only the New Testament. It wasn't Old Testament at all. So, but it said this when I opened the Bible. It said, "In 3 days I will heal you." And I'm looking at this and I'm like, man, I'm reading this for some reason, and I'm thinking, dude, I'm seeing. I know what I'm reading. I know what I'm reading. I'm 17. I'm dyslexic. I never read before, but I can see these words. In 3 days I will heal you. And I closed the Bible, and in the airplane, I remember saying to God, I said, God, if this is you in 3 days, if you heal my heart from this anger, if you heal my heart, I'm not going to kill this guy. And the plane lands to Malaysia, and my friends are waiting there. And they know why I came. But I told them, I said, listen, I need 3 days. Give me 3 days. And I remember every day, the next day I woke up, and my anger is like up to here. Like I'm about to let loose. Like I thought the only thing that would satisfy me would get blood on my hands. The second day, same thing. I feel this. I feel this anger, just ready to just unleash. I remember thinking, man, I cannot wait for the third day because I'm like, I think nothing's gonna happen. And on the third day, I wake up and I feel the exact opposite of what I was feeling that got me all the way. The feeling that got me all the way over to Malaysia, I feel the exact opposite. I feel like this saturation of a supernatural peace. Like when I woke up, I was actually shocked to feel what I'm feeling because peace was a very foreign thing to me. I had a lot of pain, a lot of turmoil, a lot of anger, but here I feel this peace that I just said, man, I don't even feel angry. Like I can't even believe I came here and now I'm facing this. I thought, man, God did a miracle, and I let that guy go. I told my guys, listen, I'm letting him go. You know. So I was there for like 3 more weeks, and I was getting back in the gang stuff. The Triad stuff. Because my goal, even when I moved back to the States, I was planning to move back to the U.S. To Malaysia at some point. And I remember that I went to a club with my guys, and there was two other guys with me, and we went to a very popular club in our city. And when the club closed, like 3 in the morning, we headed out to eat some street food, and we're sitting down on these tables by the side of the road, and this car pulls up, and it was the rivals that were in there. And the rivals came out, and right when they came out, you know, we just started fighting these guys, and one of the guys we injured pretty bad, and we left. The next day, I get a phone call, and one of my guys actually he was actually my right hand man. He was at the mall at Gurney Plaza, and he said, Choby, the guys that you guys fought last night, they're here looking for you. My leader was heading down there. Other guys are heading down there. But I met up with the two guys I was with the night before. And really quick, we put our story together, make sure we're on the same page. And my leader, he got there before I did. So he was in the top floor at a snooker center, like where they play like billiard, like pool. And my leader said, come up here, let's talk. And then we're going to go find that group. But as I'm in front of the elevator, I look behind and I can see like kind of guys coming up. And I press the elevator button and I look up and I'm looking at the numbers coming down. And when it came down 3, 2, 1 and the doors opened, when I look in front of me, I see the guys that I fought the night before. And I was kind of confused also because I didn't know how to react. And these guys who were leading the elevator started talking to the guys behind us. So immediately I knew all these guys are the same Triad group. So me and the two guys walk in the elevator, and the guy that walks past, who we beat up really bad, man, he looked me right in the face as we're crossing paths. And he tells the other guys, man, we found what we're looking for. And a lot of confrontation was going on with the words. And then one guy started talking, and the whole group on their side kept quiet. And I knew that he was the leader. He was their Tailo. And when he started talking, I felt something around me. Like I just felt this heavy presence of like death. Like I could feel it was like a spirit I was feeling. And it was hard for my mind to conceive this at this time because it was a spirit of death that I would feel when I would actually go through my sleep paralysis and kind of astral project. This kind of same fear I would feel in the spirit realm, I was feeling the same thing, but I was actually in the physical realm. And I was thinking to myself, the only reason why I might be feeling this is because maybe this demon here is waiting for me to pass on to meet it. Like this was actually going through my mind. I was feeling this, and it was so strong that I was trying to tell myself to stay focused of this leader in front of me. But at the same time, I'm feeling the spirit of death right next to me. And as this leader is talking, he says, "You messed with our guy. Now I'm coming back to handle business." And he takes out from his pants, takes out a machete, and he's holding it to our necks. And he's saying, and he's so furious, he's so angry, and he's saying, "Today's the day. Today's the day you're gonna die. I'm gonna kill you." And I wasn't afraid really of this guy. I was afraid of dying and meeting the spirit. This is what I could think about. Is I'm about to enter and not be able to come back. This is not a dream, And I remember taking a few steps back and thinking to myself, like what my mom always told me. And she told me when I was a kid, she said, "Son, whenever you get into a problem, you need to call on Jesus." And here I am, years later, these words are coming back to me. And I'm thinking about what my mom said. Now I'm in a problem that I cannot get out of. There's nothing I can do. The only thing I can do is probably die and call on God. That's it. And so I said under my breath, "God, Lord, please save me, Jesus." And that was it. That was my prayer. It was like barely a sentence. But I know I called on Jesus. And when I did that, I see the guy, the hand of the machete, and another guy I can see reach out his hand and grab his hand and bring his hand back. And I look and I see that there's a guy that I know who knows that leader. And actually we have a mutual friend, and he says to him, "Listen, these guys, Choby and them, these are my guys." And in that split second, that guy calmed down and we were able to talk things out. But it was right in that instant of that prayer And I knew that it was really God's intervention. It was really like God placing his hand there, but using the guy that he knew and the guy that I knew. And I thought, man, God heard my prayer. And the next day, I'm thinking about this whole. I'm like, I can't, like, I was supposed to die, because I know if I was that guy with the machete, I would have been hacking up, because that's what you do. If your guys get attacked on, you're responsible as a leader for handling the retaliation. Because if you don't take care of it, your boss is going to come question you. So I know by standard wise, he can bring that machete to talk. He's not going to come to our territory without trying to handle business. So I saw the mercy of God. Then the next night, I go to a club. Our triad back then, they were the biggest ecstasy dealers in Penang. We bring from Thailand. We was huge in that, and I was always taking ecstasy. And the next night, I go to a club. I'm taking ecstasy. My friend gives me a pill, and as I take the pill, once again, I can feel this spirit of death all around me, like the day before. So I started to overdose, and my friends are bringing me out of the club. They sit me down, and I remember just like my life is just leaving my body, and I was going through so much fear at the same time, thinking, man, I'm gonna actually enter this realm of the dead and be with the spirit. I'm not gonna be able to come back. But I remember thinking, I need to call on Jesus again. And I said, Jesus, please save me. And when I used that name, Jesus, I felt all this life come back into me just by his name. And I got up and I was completely sober. I mean, I was just sober. And my friends are looking at me and they're asking me, "Are you okay, Chob?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Man," I said, honestly, I said, Jesus save me. I pray to God to save me. And they were laughing and they were happy I was good, but in my mind, I knew what happened. And the next day, one of my right hand man, he was coming to drive me to pick me up. He pulls up next to me, and I was gonna get in the car with him. But before I got into the car, I heard a voice, and the voice said to me, "Put on your seatbelt." And I sit in the car and I put on my seatbelt, and my friend looks over to me and says, "Choby, why are you putting your seatbelt on?" And I told him, "You need to put your seatbelt on too," because he always would drive me and he knew I never wore my seatbelt. So he puts his seatbelt on too. And we're going down the street, and my friend's driving super fast. And there was a car in front of him that was driving fast also. And all of a sudden, that car stopped. And when that car stopped, my friend put the brakes on and started to fishtail. So the car started to slide to the left, to the right, to the left, and then all of a sudden, I thought to myself, I know how fast we're going, and no matter what we hit, no matter what we hit, this impact's going to kill us. And so I remember thinking to myself, Jesus, please save me again. I thought there's no other way I'm going to survive this car crash. And I felt this bump, and then I blacked out. After I black out, when I open my eyes, I see these leaves all on the windshield. And then I look over to my friend, and I see that he's going through a seizure, and he has blood coming all down his head, all down his chin, dripping like a stream. And when I look in front of me again, I see this massive pole, that was passing my head, and it scratched my head. So this massive pole went through the windshield. It scratched my head, and my head was leaning sideways. And I remember thinking that pole almost straight up decapitated my head. But all I could think about was getting my friend out of the car. So I popped my seatbelt off, and I opened the door, and I fall, and I hit the ground super hard. And I thought to myself, man, I don't know where the car is, because I fell from maybe 10, I don't know, 11 feet of height. I don't know exactly how high it was, but it was pretty high. And I get off the floor, and I look at the car. And what happened was the car, when it fishtailed, it jumped off the sidewalk next to it, and it actually suspended in air, and it landed in a tree. And there was two branches holding up the car. And the front of the car hit the roof of this village house. So the car was partly in the tree, and the front of the car hit the structure of this house. And so then these people from the village started coming out, and they brought my friend out of the car. After we get in the ambulance, and we get to the hospital, my friend was going through some head surgery. And I remember in the hospital, I was thinking to myself, there's no way we were supposed to survive that car accident. For a car to jump off a sidewalk and land in between two branches side by side, and the car was completely snugged in between the branches, and the pole to miss my head, I thought this was only the act of the grace of God.
Yeah, well, I don't know if there's any other really possibility. It'd be hard for me to justify anything else. It's insane. 3 days in a row where your life was spared just by seconds or millimeters. It's insane. And we had already talked about your journey towards God a little bit, but how did that change your view of him now that you experienced all that?
My mind was really uh, going through a lot, because I realize now that I only escaped because of the mercy of God. And it was I almost felt like I was going through the execution chamber 3 times, but Jesus stood in the gap when I called on him, and closed that door of death on my life. And so I'm trying to process this in the hospital. And to be honest, because everything was so traumatic, and it was consecutive days, it was hard to even process what I was going through mentally. But I knew one thing for a fact, that the name of Jesus, and Jesus, when I called on him, he intervened and saved me from entering that place of death. And no one could ever tell me, Choby, God is a fantasy, because at this moment I was completely convinced. And I was also convinced that he had such great mercy for me, because here I am. I'm the worst person that I knew. I was the most evil person. My whole life, my objective to life was to cause harm. Really for gain. And so I'm looking at, now I'm also experiencing not just the miracle of God, but I'm seeing his character, and how he could reach out to a person like me. And you see, because um, of my lifestyle, I almost kind of lived by the law in a way. We live by our own kind of law in the gang world, the triad world. I have to enforce our laws, right? I'm promoting it. I'm making sure that everything is a certain way. But here I am. I know that I'm an evil person. I've broken the things of God. I just knew that. But here, God did not treat me as I would have treated someone who would have broken the law. So like here I am, I'm feeling like I'm at the complete mercy of God. The mercy and the grace of God completely intervened when I called on him. So I felt at this place in the hospital that I'm an evil person and I have nothing to bring to this great God that saved me. And I just thought to myself, I what I can give God is just saying, God, I want you to be in my life. And so I made a prayer, and to a triad member, the Tailo is the greatest person in your life. And it was like that for me. My Tailo, my gang boss, was the biggest person in my life, the most important title. And for me, I said, God, I said, geez, I want you to be my Tailo. I remember saying that in the hospital bed. That now I give you my loyalty. That's the way I thought, and that's the way I prayed. And when I prayed that, I can feel like this light come inside of me. Like it was something happened inside of me that is really hard to explain in words, but it's almost like this hunger I was looking for all of my life, what I was chasing after, you know, I this hunger ceased. And I can sense that inside of me, that this is what I've been looking for my whole entire life. And at that moment, I realized that I had this revelation that wow, I was created for God, and this is where I'm supposed to be, inside the will of God. So I left the hospital and I fly back to the States, And but this time when I fly back in peace. I'm not flying back in anxiety. I sense that the God of the universe, the God that holds the earth in suspension right now is for me. And I am for God. And so I feel this peace flying back. I get back to the States and I get to Pittsburgh where I was living, and I go to my room, I go to my house. And I remember going on my knees and thinking, I know I can't read, but I believe that the will of God is inside this book. And so I said, God, I can't read, but I believe that you can help me read. You can open my mind to this. And so I opened the word, and little by little, the sentences, the words started to make sense to me. And I started to realize that I'm actually beginning to read this. And honestly, I'm in shock. And it wasn't like in one day. It was like every day I opened the Bible, and little by little, the sentences started to make sense. And I realized that the Holy Spirit was teaching me. And honestly, when I would open the Word and read, I would actually feel this tingling on my head and my forehead, and I could really feel this is the hand of God, and the Spirit of God was teaching me how to read. So the first book I ever read was the books of the New Testament, and I was so hungry for the Word of God. I read the New Testament 7 times in my first 6 months of being saved. I would just go through it, go through it, go through it, and I started realizing, because I started realizing as I'm reading the Word of God that my actions as a person, I had some things that were really messed up that I believed was absolutely correct. So, I started being convicted of my sinful ways, and it came from the Word of God. So God really, He actually healed me of being dyslexic from His Word, and so I was experiencing and walking through a miracle right here.
I imagine that anyone that tries to tell you that God is not real, like you probably laugh at that, because what we've been going through so far was the first miracle that actually you witnessed was with your dad that day where you fought back and you saw he changed completely. You're like, this, no one could do this but God. The second one was, I think, on the plane when you read in a book they like you literally could not read before, but you read in the book, I will heal you in 3 days. And then 3 days after, you were healed from that anger. And then these 3 days consecutively of being saved from like almost certain death. And now you start reading the New Testament, and you can read it for the first time in your life. You can read a book. Like, probably to you, like anyone that says that God is not real, like you, like, I know that they don't have the same experiences as you, but for you, you probably laugh at that.
Yeah, it really locked in my belief, because there's no way for me to deny it. You know, so once I started reading the Word of God, I also, it was almost like I have the scales of my eyes was starting to fall off, and I started to see the world in a different picture, and I started to even have joy started to come out. And I remember one day, within that 6 months I was reading, and in the middle of my time reading, I started feeling this conviction from God, and God was speaking to me, and at this time I didn't really understand the voice of God. You know, I would read the Bible and I'm like, I don't understand how God's speaking to people, but here I started feeling this deep sense in my spirit, the voice of God speaking to me, that, okay, Choby, I want you to go back, and I want you to quit the triad.
Wait, so I want to understand this, because you had already been living in the US for a little bit. How is it that you were still a member? Like, is it like a lifetime thing? How does it work?
Yeah, so basically, when I was living in the States, my right hand man was still running our group. So when I left, I put him in charge. My boss and all that always had the plan, and me too, that I was going to come live back in Malaysia permanently. So a lot of my stuff I left back in Penang. So God spoke to me in this time to go back and quit, and I really struggled with doing this, because I thought when I gave my life to Christ that God was not going to ask me to do something like this. But this conviction, and when He was speaking to me, it did not go away. It got to a point that, to be honest, that conviction was so strong. The God speaking to me was so strong. Like, there was some nights I had a hard time sleeping, because for me to go back and do this, it was really closing the door on that life completely. And also to face my leader and to do this, I spent years to please him. I spent years, building up his favor. We had a good relationship, and then also I was a branch leader, so I'm also enforcing my guys. So I'm like, I would teach against being disloyal, you know. But I said to the Lord, I said, okay, Lord, I will go for you. I thought, if I live my life putting my life on the line as a triad member, now I'm a believer of the Lord, and I seen how God took care of me, you know. And I said, God, okay, I'm gonna go back. So I bought a ticket, I think it was six. I think it was probably almost exactly 6 months later. I flew back to Penang, and I called up my boss. My boss came out. He brought me for dinner, and he brought some elders, And after we ate, I said, Tylo, there's something I have for you. And in the Chinese Triad, we when we come out, the first step is that you have to give a red envelope, and the red envelope is called an ang pao, and this red envelope has Chinese writing on it, and we use it for a lot of ceremonies in Chinese culture, and we're supposed to put in a certain amount of money, and that number is the number of the tribe that I was in, and I had that envelope on me. So I remember that I was the whole dinner I was afraid. I was afraid. I honestly, in the flesh, I didn't want to return to do this, to be honest with you, but it really was the courage of the Lord. It was really the boldness that God gave me to do this. And you have to get on your knees and you have to bow down. When you present this envelope, you have to bow down on both knees, as sign of respect. And I remember before this one, I told the Lord, because I knew I had to bow down. I said, God, when I bow down, I want you to know I'm bowing down before you, Lord, as a sign of submission to come out. And when I tell you, when I got on my knees, I felt the presence of God come on me, the presence of peace. Like, I didn't know how my leader was going to react, even though we were on good terms and everything. I didn't know how he could respond to me, but he picked me up and he said to me, he said, hey, why do you want to quit? And he actually looked a little bit shocked when he saw me with the envelope, because I know he never would expect that. People that knew me never would expect me to come out. And I told him, I shared with him, I said, hey, like, this is what God did. This is the miracles God did in my life. I said, God healed me. God healed me. God came into my life. And I said, now he changed me. He saved me. And he knew about all the incidents that I went through. The car accident, I don't know about the overdose, but he knew about the machete, all that stuff. And I said to him, I told Jesus that he's my Thilo. And he told me to come back here to meet with you. I came all the way because he spoke to me to give this to you, to come out. Because because he wants me to change my life. And he took the envelope. He said, why don't you come out and just retire? He said, you don't need to give me the ang pao. And in Chinese Triad, like, language, like, retire, it means like you've done your work. You were a committed member, and you done what you had to do, and then now you have the title of a member, but you don't have to do anything anymore. You're respected. Maybe we come to you for advice, or you're part of sometimes some intermediate stuff, but you don't have to be an active member. That's what retired means. And he said, why don't you retire? And I said, I can't retire. I said, I need to come out officially. And I said, because I also must tell my group that I quit officially. And I need you to accept this from me. He took the money out and he said, the only way I'll accept this is if you take back the money and I take the envelope and we call it peace. So I agreed to that. I took the money back. He took the envelope and he made a phone call. And he called our office, because in our street there's an office there with everybody's name who's a member. We get filed, everything. They have all our information. And he called and said, terminate Choby's file. He came out properly. He showed respect, and I'm giving him the okay. That's it. And then he let me go. And I remember when he left and I left that night, this whole burden, this weight, man, it left. I felt like this burden left me. And the next day, I called my right hand man, and I told him, I said, I want you to make a phone call and call everybody out to Gurney Plaza. You meet in our area, and you tell everybody you have to be there. Choby's in town. You gotta be. You can't miss this meeting. And everybody came. I think as far as I can recall, everybody came. They all came, and I told all of them. They sat down, and I said, "Listen, guys, this is why I flew back. I flew back for this meeting, and I flew back for a meeting I had with the big boss, the big Thilo, yesterday. And I met with the Thilo, and I told him I'm coming out. I said, this is what Jesus did. And I apologized to them. I said, you guys followed me, and I want to apologize because I brought you into this life, and now I'm coming out. And the reason why I'm coming out is because now I serve Jesus. And that was me quitting.
Were they mad at you? What was their reaction of you telling that?
I think some of them, when I first was talking like this, I really think some of them thought I was like completely joking. You know, I mean, they knew me from such a hardcore dude, and then now I'm just like talking about Jesus, you know. And some of them had questions like, okay, like who do we go under now? Like now, who do we follow? Or you know, some guys were, you know, I just, you know, they didn't know what to believe. I think some of them didn't know what to believe. You know, no, I don't think any, if anybody was mad, they didn't let me know.
What about your parents? How did they react? Because they were Christians, but like, how did they react to this sudden change in your life?
Yeah, they in the very beginning when I first got back, they had a hard time believing what I was telling them. I told them, oh yeah, you know, like I'm seeking Christ, but because of who I was, I think they had a hard time believing. But at that time in my life, I was really posting like paper. I would write down scripture that I would read, and I would just post it on my walls, even beside the wall of my bed. So when I wake up, I'm seeing the Word of God, and I just started memorizing the Word of God. And I remember that I quoted a scripture to my dad, and I remember that he was shocked that I actually remembered what I read from the Bible. Because up until this point, they never known me to ever read. And I remember later on, he told me, I believe God was working in your life because now I saw God's miracle. So he started witnessing that God was working in my life. And they were very, I think and when they were convinced, they were very relieved, especially my mom, because she was like always being the prayer warrior over my life. And I believe that her prayers intervened and really helped change the course of my life.
It really does seem like that. I believe that as well. Um, and I'm wondering, because you were in that life, that's pretty much all that you knew. You had been a gang member since the age of 13. Now, I don't know what age you were when you left, late teens, early 20s. How old were you?
Yeah. I was when I quit, I was 18.
Okay. So from 13 to 18, you had not gone to school and all that you knew was being a gang member. So what did you do after that? Once you renounced that and had become a Christian, like what was a transition into like a different kind of life?
Yeah, that part was very challenging for me. I didn't know where to even start. But God really spoke to me about getting my GED and going to college. And here I was, I could barely even do my times tables because I wasn't in school and I was dyslexic. But here I was now, God healed my mind of dyslexia, but now God was challenging me to walk in a course of really learning how to get educated. And so I started to study for the GED, and God really walked me through this. You know, like it was a very hard thing to walk through because if you remember my story, I was telling you early on, it was a place of major pressure, and it was a place of really pain for me. So when I was studying, God was walking me and helping me face a place of pain too. But I was able to get the GED and pass the exam in 10 months. So pretty much God allowed me to know everything I need to know from high school. You know, missing, you know, what is it, 4 years, 5 years, and all of a sudden in 10 months, he helped me pass that test. And I went on to also, you know, going to college. And then I remember in college, in my writing class, you know, I had a writing class, and you know, I couldn't, you know, I remember thinking to myself, I can't believe I'm actually in this class. And going from middle school, you know, never going to high school, not one day, because I got kicked out of middle school, and then now here I'm in college. So this is a miracle of God. And I remember writing papers, and my professor, there was a few times he asked me before class, and he would say, "Hey, I read your papers, you know, for this assignment, and I want to ask, you know, for your permission. I think this is so great. I want to read to the class." And I would say, "That's fantastic." And I would think, man, this. He's reading my papers, in college for me, and I thought if he only knew where I came from, you know, and God really allowed me to walk in a place of redemption in this area of my life, and it was massive for me because not in my wildest dreams growing up did I ever think I would step one day in the university, and here I was healed by God, and he really showed how much he loved me and cared for me to do this and to allow me to have the privilege and honor to you know go to college, finish. I was on the dean's list, and but also God called me to missions, and so through my years, I did I went through I had businesses, and but I always had a heart for missions. So I would stay in ministry, and every year I would travel, to preach the gospel. I think every single year I took a trip somewhere. Sometimes in my own city, sometimes in my own neighborhood. Back to Asia, I've done it. Places in South America, Central America, and um, really serving the Lord. But it's really been um, a time of redemption that God has been restoring in my life.
I think your story is so beautiful, especially with that last part. The fact that God taught you how to read and how to write, because it's one thing to get away from the life, but somehow I don't know why it just clicks with me. Like that last little part, it just touches my heart a lot. And Choby, I want to ask you as a final question, if you could speak to someone, or if you had a message to the world, given all that you've gone through and all your life story, what would be the main thing that you would say?
I would say that Jesus has the answer. He has the answer, and he has the fullness of life for us. Like just like I was sharing about walking in the place of education, but God restored. God desires to restore and bring healing to areas of our life that are in pain or trauma or abuse. Like, God, I have a great relationship with my parents. My father, he was the person I used to hate, but we are so close. I mean, and we have a great relationship. So even places of relationship, God has redeemed, and God desires to redeem areas in your life that maybe seem so difficult, and maybe it seems such a dream to even fathom that. But God is a God that Jesus says He came to give life and life to the full. So He doesn't only desire to bring healing, but also for us to operate and enjoy those areas that we've never experienced before. Because He wants that for us. He's a God that loves us. He's a God that desires for us to uh, walk through a place of redemption, and that's what I've experienced. And And I believe that God desires the same thing for you. That there's nothing impossible. You heard my story, and I know my story is one story out of really probably millions of people that has encountered the same Jesus, the Jesus that loves me, that took me as like I said, I had nothing to bring to Him, but to say, God, okay, I want you, and He took my life and redeemed it. And a lot of times we feel like we have nothing to bring to God, and the truth is, what can we offer a great God? But when we open our heart to Him and say, God, use my life, take my life in your hands. One thing I've learned is that as you heard my story, when I called on God, He is not far from us. He's not far from hearing us, and He desires to intervene in your life and in my life. So my prayer is that you guys could hear this and reach out to that same Jesus, the Redeemer, the one that brings life and life to the full. And what that means is very simple. It's really just saying to Jesus, hey, I need you. I didn't even know how to pray. I was really talking almost gang language to God, but he understands. He understands who we are. He understands, that, where we're coming from. He's not asking for a perfect person. He's not, I ask for God help all the time, even now. But he's that father that wants us to include him into our life. And, he also wants you to know that there's no one like you. He made you for a purpose, and he desires for you to welcome him into your life. And so a simple prayer is just saying, God, come into my heart, forgive me of my sin, make me a new creation. You died for me on the cross. Help me live a life for you, and remember, always call on the name of Jesus. Just like my mom told me when I was a kid, and the story I have for you now is you call on the name of the Lord. Because he says, all who call upon the name of the Lord will be saved. So that's the word.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Almost False podcast. As you might have noticed during our conversation, there's a big chunk of Choby's story that wasn't part of this interview. It was recorded though, and we talked about everything that happened in his life before the age of 13, which is actually quite a lot. We also talked about his time doing missions and about some of the miracles that he witnessed himself. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, please come check out our page on Locals. You can go directly to almostfalse.locals.com, or you can click the first link in the description. It's free to join, no strings attached, and it has all of the content that we produce, some of which is not allowed on YouTube. So check it out and let me know what you think. All right, stay blessed.